Hey everybody, I hope you're doing awesome today. This is another What's Up Wednesday. Um, Last week I talked about the shiny object syndrome and what it takes to overcome that thought pattern so that you can move on to start actually being a seller of products and making money instead of a consumer of products. So if you haven't seen that, go check it out. This week, I want to continue on talking about thinking and your thought patterns and how they influence you as a business person, an entrepreneur, and someone who's trying to make money online. But I'm going to come at it at a little bit of a different angle here. I want to talk about a band and some three lessons you can learn from this particular band. Actually, it's not really a band. It was became a band, but it was the brainchild of one man, Tom Scholz, and he was a classically trained pianist, so he was always into music. His dad was in bands. He was a trumpet player, and Tom knew how to play keyboards as well as piano, guitars, and bass guitar, lead guitar. He didn't play drums, and he wasn't a great singer. But anyway, he found a great singer. So Tom was also a prodigy of some sort. He graduated from the MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. If you're not familiar with that, is one of the more famous technical institutes in the world. And he then went on to work for Polaroid. But in his spare time, he was a musician who liked to tinker around with stuff. And he was in bands, but they weren't that successful. And anyway, he did something that was a little bit unusual, because usually when you record, you have an engineer and you talk to the engineer and you try to tell him what sound you're looking for, and then hopefully you can figure it out and put it together, and then you come up with the sound. But because he was an engineer, he was able to, all the things that he had in his head, he could put down on tape. At this time it was all analog tape, and he built this studio in his basement, and he was always recording. And anyway, he recorded this album, which became Boston, and he had this certain sound in his head, but he couldn't get it from anything that was out there. So he invented this box, and it eventually became a business for him. But anyway, he created this sound that was really unique. It was like layered guitars, and he was very, very concise about what he was doing. It would take him days and days just to lay down like a bass track. And he created this box that allowed him to have like these layered guitar sounds, and they almost sounded like 3D, like they were coming out of the record player at you. Really, really neat. I mean, we have this now, but back then nobody even heard of it. And so anyway, he created this album, and he could play all the instruments, and he found a singer, a really great singer, and he recorded this album. He sent it around to all the studios, and of course, this was in the time of 1976. Was in the time of disco. Oh my God, I hated that era. I love old rock and roll, so it was just torturous to me. And the 70s were pretty turbulent times. But anyway, he released this album, and the record executives heard the tape, and they wanted to reproduce the album in his studio. And he said, no, I got my own studio. So they came over to his house and saw what he was doing, and they were amazed that he could create such an amazing sound in his basement. And they said, no, we wanted you to record it in in our studio, and here's the first concept that you should learn and take into your business. He said, no, I won't release this, even though he, had struggled in bands for a long time. He said, I won't release it. I want to do it myself. I want to record this in my own studio. And they were about to leave, and they decided halfway out the door, he said, and they came back and said, okay, we'll do it your way. So the first thing to know is if you think something is good, don't listen to other people. Just go ahead and keep putting it out. Anyway, so they put out this album, and it got a huge amount of play on all the radio stations, and people loved it. And they went on tour, and it went on to sell like almost 30 million copies. Just absolutely amazing. But anyway, what happened was, back then, and I don't know, it may still happen today, but there was a lot of corruption in the radio industry, and everybody and record companies were very corrupt. They'd pay off the DJs, radio DJs as they called them, to play the records, and they wanted a certain sound. And even though they were extremely successful, they were pushing on Tom all the time to come up with another album that was exactly the same. And so he got into some pretty big fights, and so his albums were in litigation. Second album was in litigation, took 6 years before it came out, and then another one took another, I think, 6-7 years, and eventually the band broke up over it. And concept number 2 is, even though someone is pushing you, let's see, I wrote these down here. Yeah, I think I said this already, don't listen to what other people say. Put out what you want. Don't fall for the people that are poisoning you. And also, he was extremely persistent. Even though he was very successful, and he just decided that if he couldn't put out his music, he wasn't going to put it out. So because he was an engineer and he still loved music, he started to design these various different things that could make music a lot better for everybody. Engineered them and sold them, and started a company called Rockman, and he was successful at that too. Oh yeah, and so the other concept, so don't listen to what other people say, just put it out. Number 2, be very persistent. And number 3 was, when he sent in the tape and they said it was really good, he was shocked. He didn't think his music was all that good, and he was very insecure about going on the road, and very insecure about his music, but he did it anyway. And so there may be, especially as you begin, you may have trouble talking on camera and be worried about what people are going to think, and worried about, like, I got bad teeth, but whatever. Just keep pushing forward, be persistent. Anyway, I thought Tom Scholz was an amazing guy who had a lot of gifts, had a lot of insecurities, but was persistent and just kept doing it, and stuff happened for him. And the same thing will happen for you in the online business too. There's going to be a lot of people telling you to put out stuff that's substandard, and you're going to put out, just put out what you think is good. And even if nobody's watching in the beginning, don't worry. You're going to build an audience. People are going to relate to you one way or another. So that's all I have for this What's Up Wednesday. I think next week we're going to talk about maybe some technical stuff, get away from the mindset, but we'll come back to it from time to time. And if this at all resonates with you, let me know. Drop me an email or comment in the comments. Until next week, stay awesome.